This is part 2 of a reading from Beverly Cleary's much-loved chapter book, Ramona Quimby, age 8, starting at Chapter 2. Chapter 2, At Howie's House. "Now be nice to Willa Jean," said Mrs. Quimby as she handed Ramona her lunchbox. Grown-ups often forgot that no child likes to be ordered to be nice to another child. Ramona made a face. "Mother, do you have to say that every single morning?" she asked in exasperation. Deep down inside, where she hid her darkest secrets, Ramona sometimes longed to be horrid to Willa Jean. Okay, I'll try to remember," said Mrs. Quimby with a little laugh. I know it isn't easy." She kissed Ramona and said, "Cheer up and run along or you'll miss your bus." Being a member of the Quimby family in the 3rd grade was harder than Ramona had expected. Her father was often tired, in a hurry, or studying on the dining room table, which meant no one could disturb him by watching television. At school, she was still not sure how she felt about Mrs. Whaley. Liking a teacher was important, Ramona had discovered when she was in the 1st grade, and even though her family understood, Ramona still dreaded that part of the day spent at Howie's house in the company of Mrs. Kemp and Willa Jean. Those were the bad parts of the 3rd grade. There were good parts, too. Ramona enjoyed riding the bus to school, and she enjoyed keeping Yardape from getting the best of her. Then another good part of the 3rd grade began the 2nd week of school. Just before her class was to make its weekly visit to the school library, Mrs. Whaley announced, "Today and from now on, we are going to have sustained silent reading every day." Ramona liked the sound of sustained silent reading, even though she was not sure what it meant, because it sounded important. Mrs. Whaley continued, "This means that every day after lunch, we are going to sit at our desks and read silently to ourselves any book we choose in the library." Even mysteries?" someone asked. "Even mysteries," said Mrs. Whaley. "Do we have to give book reports on what we read?" asked one suspicious member of the class. "No book reports on your sustained silent reading books," Mrs. Whaley promised the class. Then she went on, "I don't think sustained silent reading sounds very interesting, so I think we will call it something else." Here she printed 4 big letters on the blackboard, and as she pointed, she read out DEAR. Can anyone guess what these letters stand for? The class thought and thought. "Do everything all right?" suggested someone. A good thought, but not the right answer. "Don't eat a reader," suggested Yardape. Mrs. Whaley laughed and told him to try again. As Ramona thought, she stared out the window at the blue sky, the treetops, and, in the distance, the snow-capped peak of Mount Hood, looking like a giant licked ice cream cone. R could stand for run, and A for and. Drop everything and run," Ramona burst out. Mrs. Whaley, who was not the sort of teacher who expected everyone to raise a hand before speaking, laughed and said, "Almost right, Ramona. But have you forgotten we are talking about reading?" "Drop everything and read," chorused the rest of the class. Ramona felt silly. She should have thought of that herself. Ramona decided that she preferred sustained silent reading to dear because it sounded more grown up. When time came for everyone to drop everything and read. She sat quietly, doing her sustained, silent reading. How peaceful it was to be left alone in school. She could read without trying to hide her book under her desk or behind a bigger book. She was not expected to write lists of words she did not know, so she could figure them out by skipping and guessing. Mrs. Whaley did not expect the class to write summaries of what they read either, so she did not have to choose easy books to make sure she would get her summary right. Now, if Mrs. Whaley would leave her alone to draw too, school would be almost perfect. Yes, sustained, silent reading was the best part of the day. Howie and Ramona talked it over after school and agreed as they walked from the bus to his house. There they found two of the new friends he had made at Cedarhurst School waiting with their bicycles. Ramona sat on the Kemps's front steps, her arms clasped around her knees, her sustained silent reading book of fairy tales beside her, and looked with longing at the boys' two bicycles while Howie wheeled his bicycle out of the garage. Because Howie was kind and because Ramona was his friend, he asked, "Ramona, would you like to ride my bicycle to the corner and back?" Would she? Ramona jumped up, eager to take a turn. "Just once," said Howie. Ramona mounted the bicycle, and while the three boys silently watched, teetered and wobbled to the corner without falling off. Having to dismount to turn the bicycle around was embarrassing, but riding back was easier. At least she didn't wobble quite so much, and she managed to dismount as if she were used to doing so. "All I need is a little practice," thought Ramona, as Howie seized his bicycle and rode off with his friends, leaving her with nothing to do but pick up her book and join Willa Jean in the house. Now that Willa Jean was going to nursery school, she was full of ideas. Dressing up was one of them. She met Ramona at the door with an old curtain wrapped around her shoulders. "Hurry up and have your snack," she ordered, while her grandmother sat watching television and crocheting. The snack turned out to be pineapple juice and rye crisp, a pleasant change for Ramona, even though Willa Jean stood impatiently beside her, watching every swallow until she had finished. "Now I'll be the lady and you be the dog," directed Willa Jean. "But I don't want to be a dog," said Ramona. Willa Jean's grandmother looked up from her crocheting, reminding Ramona with a glance that Ramona's job in the Quimby family was to get along at the Kempses. Did she have to be a dog if Willa Jean wanted her to, then? "You have to be the dog," said Willa Jean. "Why?" Ramona kept an eye on Mrs. Kemp as she wondered how far she dared go in resisting Willa Jean's orders. "Because I'm a beautiful rich lady, and I say so," Willa Jean informed her. "I'm a bigger, beautifuler, richer lady," said Ramona, who felt neither beautiful nor rich, but certainly did not want to crawl around on her hands and knees, barking. "We can't both be the lady," said Willa Jean, "and I said it first." Ramona could not argue the justice of this point. "What kind of dog am I supposed to be?" she asked, to stall for time. She glanced wistfully at her book lying on the chair, the book she was supposed to read at school, but which she was enjoying so much she brought it home. While Willa Jean was thinking, Mrs. Kemp said, "Sweetheart, don't forget Bruce is coming over to play in a few minutes." "Bruce who?" asked Ramona, hoping Willa Jean and Bruce would play together and leave her alone to read. Bruce who doesn't wee-wee in the sandbox," was Willa Jean's prompt answer. "Willa Jean," Mrs. Kemp was shocked. "What a thing to say about your little friend." Ramona was not shocked. She understood that there must be a second Bruce at Willa Jean's nursery school, a Bruce who did wee-wee in the sandbox. As things turned out, Ramona was saved from being a dog by the arrival of a small boy whose mother let him out of the car and watched him reach the front door before she drove off. Willa Jean ran to let him in and introduced him as Ramona expected. "This is Bruce, who doesn't wee-wee in the sandbox." Bruce looked pleased with himself. Mrs. Kemp felt a need to apologize for her granddaughter. Willa Jean doesn't mean what she says." "But I don't wee-wee in the sandbox," said Bruce. "I wee-wee—" Never mind, Bruce," said Mrs. Kemp. "Now, what are you three going to play?" Ramona was trapped. "Dress up," was Willa Jean's prompt answer. She dragged from the corner a carton piled with old clothes. Willa Jean shoved one of her father's old jackets at Bruce and handed him an old hat and her blue flippers. She unwound the curtain from her shoulders, draped it over her head, and tied it under her chin. Then she hung a piece of old sheet from her shoulders. Satisfied with herself, she handed a torn shirt to Ramona, who put it on only because Mrs. Kemp was watching. "There," said Willa Jean, satisfied. "I'll be Miss Mousie, the beautiful bride, and Bruce is the frog, and Ramona is Uncle Rat, and now we are going to have a wedding party." Ramona did not want to be Uncle Rat. "Mr. Frogwood, a woo and go," sang Willa Jean. Bruce joined in. Hum. Apparently, this song was popular in nursery school. Ramona too. "Say it," Willa Jean ordered Bruce. "Willa Jean, will you marry me?" sang Bruce. Willa Jean stamped her foot. "Not Willa Jean, Miss Mousie." Bruce started over. "Miss Mousie, will you marry me?" he sang. "Yes, if Uncle Rat will agree," sang Willa Jean. Hummed all three. The two nursery school children looked to Ramona for the next line. Since she did not remember the words used by Uncle Rat to give Mr. Frog permission to marry Miss Mousie, she said, "Sure, go ahead." "Okay," said Willa Jean. "Now we will have the wedding party." She seized Bruce and Ramona by the hand. "Take Bruce's other hand," she ordered Ramona. Ramona found Bruce's hand inside the long sleeve of the old coat. His hand was sticky. "Now we'll dance in a circle," directed Willa Jean. Ramona skipped, Willa Jean pranced, and Bruce flapped. They danced in a circle, tripping on Miss Mousie's train and wedding veil and stumbling over Mr. Frog's flippers until Willa Jean gave the next order. "Now we all fall down." Ramona merely dropped to her knees while Willa Jean and Bruce collapsed in a heap, laughing. Above their laughter and the sound of the television, Ramona heard the shouts of the boys outside as they rode their bicycles up and down the street. She wondered how much longer she would have to wait until her mother came to rescue her. She hoped she would arrive before Howie's parents came home from work. Willa Jean scrambled to her feet. "Let's play it again," she said, beaming, convinced of her beauty in her wedding veil. Over and over, the three sang, danced, and fell down. As the game went on and on, Ramona grew bored and varied the words she used to give Mr. Frog permission to marry Miss Mousie. Sometimes she said, "See if I care." And sometimes she said, "Yes, but you'll be sorry." Willa Jean did not notice. She was so eager to get to the party part of the game, where they all fell down in a heap. Still, the game went on over and over, with no sign of Bruce and Willa Jean's tiring. Then Beezus came in with an armload of books. "Hi, Beezus," said Willa Jean, flushed with laughter. You can play too. You can be the old tomcat in the song." I'm sorry, Willa Jean," said Beezus. "I don't have time to be the old tomcat. I have homework I have to do." She settled herself at the dining room table and opened a book. Ramona looked at Mrs. Kemp, who smiled and continued crocheting. Why did Ramona have to play with Willa Jean when Beezus did not? Because she was younger. That was why. Ramona was overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all. Because she was younger, she always had to do things she did not want to do. Go to bed earlier, wear Beezus's outgrown clothes that her mother saved for her, run and fetch because her legs were younger, and because Beezus was always doing homework. Now she had to get along with Willa Jean. Her whole family was depending on her, and Beezus did not. Once more, Ramona looked at her book of fairy tales waiting on the chair beside the front door, and as she looked at its worn cover, she had an inspiration. Maybe her idea would work, and maybe it wouldn't. It was worth a try. "Willa Jean, you and Bruce will have to excuse me now," Ramona said in her politest voice. "I have to do my sustained silent reading." Out of the corner of her eye, she watched Mrs. Kemp. "Okay." Willa Jean was not only impressed by a phrase she did not understand, she had Bruce to boss around. Mrs. Kemp, who was counting stitches, merely nodded. Ramona picked up her book and settled herself in the corner of the couch. Beezus caught her eye, and the two sisters exchanged conspiratorial smiles while Willa Jean and Bruce, now minus Uncle Rat, raced happily around in a circle, screaming with joy and singing, "She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes." Ramona blissfully read herself off into the land of princesses, kings, and clever youngest sons, satisfied that the Quimbys had a clever younger daughter who was doing her part. Chapter 3. The Hardboiled Egg Fad. With all four members of the family leaving at different times in different directions, mornings were flurried in the Quimby household. On the days when Mr. Quimby had an 8 o'clock class, he left early in the car. Beezus left next because she walked to school and because she wanted to stop for Mary Jane on the way. Ramona was third to leave. She enjoyed these last few minutes alone with her mother, now that Mrs. Quimby no longer reminded her she must be nice to Willa Jean. "Did you remember to give me a hard-boiled egg in my lunch, like I asked?" Ramona inquired one morning. This week, hard-boiled eggs were popular with third graders, a fad started by Yard Ape, who sometimes brought his lunch. Last week, the fad had been individual bags of corn chips. Ramona had been left out of that fad because her mother objected to spending money on junk food. Surely her mother would not object to a nutritious hard-boiled egg. "Yes, I remembered the hard-boiled egg, you little rabbit," said Mrs. Quimby. "I'm glad you have finally learned to like them." Ramona did not feel it necessary to explain to her mother that she still did not like hard-boiled eggs, not even when they had been dyed for Easter. Neither did she like soft-boiled eggs, because she did not like slippery, slithery food. Ramona liked deviled eggs, but deviled eggs were not the fad, at least not this week. On the bus, Ramona and Susan compared lunches. Each was happy to discover that the other had a hard-boiled egg, and both were eager for lunchtime to come. While Ramona waited for lunch period, school turned out to be unusually interesting. After the class had filled out their arithmetic workbooks, Mrs. Whaley handed each child a glass jar containing about 2 inches of a wet blue substance. She explained that it was oatmeal dyed blue. Ramona was first to say, "Yuck!" Most people made faces, and Yardape made a gagging noise. "Okay, kids, quiet down," said Mrs. Whaley. When the room was quiet, she explained that for science they were going to study fruit flies. The blue oatmeal contained fruit fly larvae. "And why do you think the oatmeal is blue?" she asked. Several people thought the blue dye was some sort of food for the larvae. Vitamins, maybe. Marcia suggested the oatmeal was dyed blue so the children wouldn't think it was good to eat. Everybody laughed at this guess. Who would ever think cold oatmeal was good to eat? Yardape came up with the right answer. The oatmeal was dyed blue so the larvae could be seen. And so they could, little white specks. As the class bent over their desks, making labels for their jars, Ramona wrote her name on her slip of paper and added age 8, which she always wrote after her signature. Then she drew tiny fruit flies around it before she pasted the label on her very own jar of blue oatmeal and fruit fly larvae. Now she had a jar of pets. "That's a really neat label, Ramona," said Mrs. Whaley. Ramona understood that her teacher did not mean tidy when she said neat, but extra good. Ramona decided she liked Mrs. Whaley after all. The morning was so satisfactory that it passed quickly. When lunchtime came, Ramona collected her lunchbox and went off to the cafeteria, where, after waiting in line for her milk, she sat at a table with Sarah, Janet, Marcia, and other third-grade girls. She opened her lunchbox, and there, tucked in a paper napkin, snug between her sandwich and her orange, was her hard-boiled egg, smooth and perfect, the right size to fit her hand. Because Ramona wanted to save the best for the last, she ate the center of her sandwich, tuna fish, and poked a hole in her orange so she could suck out the juice. Third graders did not peel their oranges. At last, it was time for the egg. There were a number of ways of cracking eggs. The most popular, and the real reason for bringing an egg to school, was knocking the egg against one's head. There were 2 ways of doing so, by a lot of timid little raps, or by one big whack. Sarah was a rapper. Ramona, like Yardape, was a whacker. She took a firm hold on her egg, waited until everyone at her table was watching, and whack! She found herself with a handful of crumbled shell and something cool and slimy running down her face. Everyone at Ramona's table gasped. Ramona needed a moment to realize what had happened. Her egg was raw. Her mother had not boiled her egg at all. She tried to brush the yellow yolk and slithery white out of her hair and away from her face, but she only succeeded in making her hands eggy. Her eyes filled with tears of anger, which she tried to brush away with her wrists. The gasps at her table turned into giggles. From another table, Ramona caught a glimpse of Yardape grinning at her. Marcia, a tall girl who always tried to be motherly, said, "It's all right, Ramona. I'll take you to the bathroom and help you wash off the egg." Ramona was not one bit grateful. "You go away," she said, ashamed of being so rude. She did not want this third-grade girl treating her like a baby. The teacher who was supervising lunch period came over to see what the commotion was about. Marcia gathered up all the paper napkins from the lunch boxes at the table and handed them to the teacher, who tried to sop up the egg. Unfortunately, the napkins did not absorb egg very well, Instead, they smeared yolk and white around in Ramona's hair. Her face felt stiff as egg white began to dry. Take her to the office, the teacher said to Marcia. Mrs. Larson will help her. Come on, Ramona, said Marcia, as if Ramona were in kindergarten. She put her hand on Ramona's shoulder because Ramona's hands were too eggy to touch. Ramona jerked away. I can go by myself. With that reply, she ran out of the cafeteria. She was so angry, she was able to ignore the giggles and the few sympathetic looks of the other children. Ramona was mad at herself for following a fad. She was furious with Yard Ape for grinning at her. Most of all, she was angry with her mother for not boiling the egg in the first place. By the time she reached the office, Ramona's face felt as stiff as a mask. Ramona almost ran into Mr. Whitman, the principal, which would have upset her even more. He was someone Ramona always tried to avoid ever since Beezus had told her that the way to remember how to spell the kind of principal who was the principal of a school was to remember the word ended in P-A-L, not P-L-E, because the principal was her pal. P-A-L, pal. Ramona did not want the principal to be her pal. She wanted him to mind his own business, aloof and important, in his office. Mr. Whitman must have felt the same way, because he almost jumped, quickly aside. Mrs. Larson, the school secretary, took one look at Ramona, sprang from her desk, and said, "Well, you need a little help, don't you?" Ramona nodded, grateful to Mrs. Larson for behaving as if eggy third graders walked into her office every day. The secretary led her into a tiny room equipped with a cot, wash basin, and toilet that adjoined the office. "Let's see," said Mrs. Larson. "How shall we go about this? I guess the best way is to wash your hands, then dunk your head. You've heard of egg shampoos, haven't you? They're supposed to be wonderful for the hair." "Yow!" yelped Ramona when she dipped her head into the wash basin. The water's cold." "It's probably a good thing we don't have warmer water," said Mrs. Larson. "You wouldn't want to cook the egg in your hair, would you?" She rubbed, and Ramona snuffled. She rinsed, and Ramona sniffed. Finally, Mrs. Larson said, "That's the best I can do," and handed Ramona a wad of paper towels. "Dry yourself off the best you can," she said. "You can wash your hair when you get home." Ramona accepted the towels. As she sat on the cot, rubbing and blotting and seething in humiliation and anger, she listened to sounds from the office, the click of the typewriter, the ring of the telephone, Mrs. Larson's voice answering. Ramona began to calm down and feel a little better. Maybe Mrs. Kemp would let her wash her hair after school. She could let Willa Jean pretend to be working in a beauty shop and not say anything about her sustained silent reading. One of these days, Willa Jean was sure to catch on that she was just reading a book, and Ramona wanted to postpone that time as long as possible. Toward the end of the lunch period, Ramona heard teachers drift into the office to leave papers or pick up messages from their boxes. Then Ramona made an interesting discovery. Teachers talked about their classes. "My class has been so good today," said one teacher. "I can hardly believe it. They're little angels." "I don't know what's the matter with my class today," said another. "Yesterday they knew how to subtract, and today none of them seems able to remember." "Perhaps it's the weather," suggested another teacher. Ramona found all this conversation most interesting. She had blotted her hair as best she could when she heard Mrs. Whaley's big, cheerful voice speaking to Mrs. Larson. Here are those tests I was supposed to hand in yesterday," she said. "Sorry I'm late." Mrs. Larson murmured an answer. And with Ramona waiting in the principal's office, that's the end of part 2. To be continued.